Welcome to the November Citizens Climate Lobby Call. My name is Mark Reynolds. I'm a member of the CCL staff, and I'm the host of this monthly call. What's going to happen today is in just a couple of moments, I'm going to share a video with you that will do a way better job of introducing our guest than I could possibly do. After that video, which is about 7 minutes long, then Tia Nelson will join me, who you can see. We're very, very excited to have her, and thank you for making yourself available, Tia. After that, I want to talk a little bit about our upcoming December conference, go over some of the remarkable things that happened since last month's call, and then talk about what we're going to be doing. So without further ado, Ricky, if you could please share our video.
Our goal is not just an environment of clean air and water and scenic beauty while forgetting about the worst environments in America. Our goal is an environment of decency, quality, and mutual respect for all human beings and all other living creatures. Our goal is a decent environment in its broadest and deepest sense, and it will require a long, sustained political, moral, ethical, and financial commitment far beyond any commitment ever made by any society in the history of man.
My name is Tia Nelson. I am the daughter of Gaylord Nelson, the founder of Earth Day. My father was an extraordinary dad. He was an extraordinary leader. Growing up as his daughter, it was mostly a great privilege, but also I felt a heavy sense of duty to public service and to making a difference with my life. I work for the Outrider Foundation. Our goal is to educate people about big global challenges like climate change. One of my favorite quotes from my father was delivered on the eve of the first Earth Day in 1970. He said, ecology is a big science,
not a narrow one. It's a big concept, and it is concerned with all the ramifications of all the relationships of all living creatures to each other and their environment.
So when he talked about the environment, he talked about ecology and environment in the broadest sense, in the most inclusive sense. That idea resonated with students across the country. Collectively, they made a difference that was unforeseeable.
This movement and this fight is about all of us, because what is more fundamental than the air that we breathe, than water, than the soil that we stand on, than the land that we love? Like, what is more fundamental to every single one of us than that? My name is Varshini Prakash. I am from Boston, Massachusetts, and I am one of the co-founders of Sunrise Movement. We are building a movement of young people all across this nation to stop the climate crisis and create millions of good jobs for our generation in the process. And when I began looking back into what the first Earth Day was like, what it meant, the level of people who got involved, the kind of political action, I think for me, Earth Day now is about getting back to our roots.
My father was brilliant at working across the aisle to build consensus. He knew when to compromise, he knew when to stick to his principles. Think of all of the important environmental laws that were passed after that first Earth Day, and they were passed with significant support from both parties.
For 6 years, I said that climate change was nonsense, in as much as I represented Greenville-Spartanburg, South Carolina, probably one of the reddest districts, the reddest state of the nation. That was the end of the inquiry for me. So I admit that's fairly ignorant, but that's the way it was for 6 years. So I'm Bob Inglis, and I run an outfit called republicen.org, where conservatives, convincing conservatives that they're really good on climate and that they've got the answer. It's free enterprise innovation. My son, the eldest of our 5 kids, came to me. He was voting for the first time because he just turned 18. And he said to me, "Dad, I'll vote for you, but you're going to clean up your act on the environment." It's the first of a 3-step metamorphosis for me. Step 2 was going to Antarctica with the science committee. seeing the evidence in the ice core drillings. Step 3 was another science committee trip. It's there that at a stopover at the Great Barrier Reef, great blessing there was meeting an Australian climate scientist named Scott Heron, and just being inspired by his faith to act on climate change.
When Bob spoke about climate change while serving in the United States Congress, he was primaried and he lost his election. He was attacked for speaking the words climate change. This was a transformative moment in his life and led to him dedicating his whole career today to addressing the climate change challenge.
For young people growing up in this country, we have been defined by the climate crisis. People who have been born after the year 2000 have never lived a year on this planet that wasn't one of the hottest years on record. We are the climate generation. And so now, at a young age, we have realized that if our politicians aren't going to do something about this problem, then we have to take matters into our own hands.
Through leadership of people like Varshini, the youth movement has been energized in the last year in ways that resemble what was happening almost 50 years ago when the first Earth Day occurred.
There comes a place where activism drives even the crustiest old-timer to decide to get involved.
I don't think there's any other issue viewed in its broadest sense, which is as critical to mankind as the issue of the quality of the environment in which we live.
Environmentalism is not a partisan issue. Environmentalism is a quality of life issue for all of us.
You know, I'm very optimistic about the future. I think we're going to solve climate change. It's going to be that conservatives come together with progressives to figure out we're literally in this together.
This is about not just changing light bulbs, this is about changing our politics. And if anything, we will be successful because we do it together.
I want the youth of today to know that I have done everything that I can to ensure on the 100th anniversary of Earth Day, we are celebrating a brighter future. We're at a critical moment in history. We have an opportunity to address the greatest environmental challenge of our time.
Are we able? Yes. Are we willing? That's the unanswered question.
Great. Tia Nelson, we are so delighted to have you here. And I'm sure you've seen that a lot more times than I have, but I hope you're still kind of lit up and touched by it as much as I am every time. So could we just start with your father a little bit and talk about his vision in creating Earth Day? You know, he spoke on such broad themes in the video, but we just were able to just capture a few minutes of that. So he was obviously after something really big. And could you just tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure, thanks, Mark, and to all the CCL volunteers on the call today. I'm grateful for your work. You know, the first Earth Day, this was the 50th anniversary this year, was April 22nd, 1970. What many people don't know is just how long and challenging a journey it was for my father to get to that place of success, and how many setbacks and disappointments he experienced along the way. He had become known in Wisconsin as the conservation governor due to a bold initiative of putting a penny a pack tax on cigarettes and funding a statewide conservation and recreation program in Wisconsin, where he was serving as governor. And that got him a lot of positive attention, and there was a lot of bipartisan support, and the national press picked up on it. He gets elected to the United States Senate and imagines that people will embrace and understand that this is a winning message and important work. And it really fell on deaf ears in Washington. He did convince President Kennedy. You can see in the image behind me, the Earth Day poster, Kennedy and Papa getting off a helicopter. That's 1963, a few months before President Kennedy was assassinated. My father, after getting to Washington and not being successful getting people to talk about the environment, trying to think of an idea that would appeal to a broad spectrum of Americans, went to President Kennedy and convinced him to do a conservation tour. And that tour, which is depicted in that image behind me, was a complete failure and was cut short. Was supposed to be a multi-city tour talking about a variety of issues, and it had failed to achieve what my father had hoped. And so fast forward to 19, and I'm almost done with the history here, but I think important lessons from it. Fast forward from 1963 to 1969, he continued to struggle in Washington and getting people to pay attention to this message. He went off to Santa Barbara to inspect what was then the largest oil spill in American history. And he got on a plane and he opened up a magazine and he read a story about how students and college campuses were changing the discourse on the Vietnam War. And he had one of those aha moments and said, I'm going to call for Environmental Teach-In Day. And it was successful beyond his wildest dreams when 20 million people gathered that day, of both, multi-generational, bipartisan, socially just call to action that came from the citizens across the country, and really successful beyond his wildest dreams. But it was a long journey, and there were lots of setbacks along the way, is one of the important things to keep in mind,
Wow, that is so inspiring. Thank you for filling in some of those details. It's easy to forget the scope and depth of the initial commitment. I go to my Earth Day here every year, but most like, stop at booths, they're like selling incense. Which, I love incense, but it doesn't quite grasp the entirety of the vision. One of the things that I love about the video also is that you've got Varshini, one of the founders of Sunrise, and you've got Bob Inglis, who share a broad commitment, but have completely different avenues to solve the problem. And I think it's so easy to always define ourselves for our differences with people, but you found something where you have something where what they have is in common is the more important thing. And we're really interested in organization and how do you build coalitions of people that view different solutions to solving this big problem? How do you include people, and how do you have them, if they even believe in a way different avenue of solution, how do you include them in your work?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It's imbued in me, this notion of building bridges and thinking that we can solve big problems, working together it was at the core of my father's values and very existence. And it's just, whether it's baked into my DNA or something I absorb by osmosis or some combination, that's always been the way I've approached big environmental challenges. I wanted this film not to just be a reflection on my father's legacy, which is obviously very personally important to me, but I wanted it to tell the story of the past, but contextualize it in terms of the present and think about the future. And the fact that we can't, if environmentalists could solve the climate change dilemma that I've worked for so many decades on, we would have crossed the finish line and not be facing the severity of the crisis that we face today. And we need to build bridges to amplify the voices of unexpected messengers. I love working with Bob Inglis. I've come, and you guys are so lucky to have him on your board. Just a wonderful guy, and who, I joke, I was raised an unbaptized heathen, and he an evangelical Christian. He's a Republican, and I'm a progressive. And I thought Varshini and Bob were the perfect bookends to tell the story, because after the first Earth Day, more environmental laws passed than any other time in American history. a Republican president signed into law, Richard Milhouse Nixon. There was an image of him in the film signing into law the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency to protect everyone's right, Democrats and Republicans alike, to breathe clean air and drink clean water. And so having being able, I was just so grateful that both Varshini and Bob agreed to appear in my film and help amplify this message and this idea that united we can solve it. And it didn't matter to me that Varshini has one solution and Bob has a very different approach to it. What matters is that we come and sit together at the table, acknowledge the great challenge before us, and roll up our sleeves and get to work on finding a compromise that will abate the threats to the best degree possible, while making it possible to expand the social and political will for action.
Beautiful. It reminds me kind of the first time we had Catherine Hayhoe on our call as a monthly speaker, and she wasn't really well known at the time. We just read that there was this evangelical climate scientist, and one of the things she said is, there's a lot of people that want to help, but they want to come to the issue through their faith. And I had thought up until then, the only way to come to this with validity was through science. But I think that it's important that we recognize that we want to come to people where they are and what brings them to the issue, not necessarily this is going to be the same thing that brings us to the issue. So one of the things I imagine that most of our members are not that familiar with the Outrider Foundation. So could you just tell us a little bit more about your organization, and then we'll open it up to see what kind of questions that come from the membership.
Sure, I'd be glad to. I'm a big fan of Catherine Hayhoe's, and she's just, by the way, and she's helped me think a little differently about the issue. And there's some interesting work at the university trying to break down these barriers between the ideas of faith and science somehow being separate silos, and never the two shall meet. And I think there's just great potential in the creation care movement that is emerging to come at protecting the environment from a value proposition that comes from one's faith. I think that is just remarkably powerful. The Outrider Foundation, the name is a little bit misleading. We're not a grant-making foundation. We're an operating foundation founded by Frank Burgess to engage, inspire, inform action on two big global environmental challenges: climate change, which I'm managing director for, and nuclear weapons proliferation, two big global existential crises. And we do this through educating people using storytelling, short form video, digital content. We ran a whole United We Can Solve This campaign around the Earth Day film. And that was wildly successful, in part because we made kinship with other partners who helped us distribute the content and amplify the message. United We Can Solve This. CCL indeed helped us in that effort. John Foley and from Project Drawdown, and Catherine Hayhoe as well, and other NGOs. So we do digital storytelling, education, hoping to make people feel empowered to take action at the end of the day, to be part of a solving, to not feel overwhelmed and not relevant to these big challenges, but rather to feel empowered and engaged and involved in solving them. It's one of the things, and I meant this in the social post I did a few days ago, of all of the things that CCL does, the one that to me is most valuable is you teach people in a really effective way, citizens, that they not only how to be effective, walking the halls of Congress, influencing decision makers on this big challenge, but that give them the power and give them a sense of agency and purpose and rightness in being there. And that's one of the things I want to do it Outrider. I look for improbable voices to help amplify the message. So Bob English would be an example of that. Brent Suter, the pitcher for the Milwaukee Brewers, is another. He's our sports ambassador. Brent can reach people that I can't reach, right? And that was always Catherine Hayhoe's point. Meet people where you are, meet them, where they are, meet them at their value proposition, whether that's faith or baseball or trout fishing, whatever it might be, and listen and bring them into the conversation. So that's what we try to do, to amplify stories and help people see and imagine themselves as being a part of the solution.
Boy, I love a lot of things there. I love the term improbable voices.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing to go after, and then to and amplifying people's voices. Let me just check with Flannery. Flannery, are there the questions in the chat or themes in the chat that we would like Tia to address?
Sure. We have one question acknowledging that 2020 was the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, but of course a lot of celebrations and events were interrupted because of the pandemic, and this person is asking if you have any advice or thoughts about how to still celebrate that big anniversary, or maybe what might be in store for the 51st.
Oh, well, thanks for that question. Yeah, I felt terrible for all of the local organizers across the country and across the globe. At this point, Earth Day is celebrated in 195 countries, right? Close to 1 billion people in 195 countries do something to honor Earth Day. And those in-person events, sadly, were canceled because of COVID. It turned out to be a weird little silver lining for our film, because we had high quality digital content on the shelf and ready to go to tell that story. So we were fortunate in that regard. The 51st, I mean, there's a couple groups. EarthX decided to celebrate Earth Day halfway between the two, the 50th and the 51st, imagining that things would be better with COVID, and that did not turn out to be the case. So I don't know what spring is going to look like, right? And whether in-person events are going to be larger gatherings possible. We just don't know. So, but there's always something one can do to become more involved, whether it's write their member of Congress or do a project with their kids or plant a tree or clean up in their local park. And there are things one can do alone, and hopefully we'll be able to gather, though I just think it's really too soon to tell.
Yeah, it was interesting. So Earth Day was our first big virtual event, and it scared the crap out of us, because we'd had a lot of practice getting people together in meeting rooms and in DC and regional conferences. And so we learned a lot on that Earth Day, and it gave us the confidence to go ahead and do our annual June conference virtually. And then our volunteers started getting creative. So one of the Senate meetings associated with that had 150 people in it. We've never been able to crowd 150 people into a Senate office, right?
Yeah, right.
And we had a lot of people who were able to bring influencers from their communities to lobby meetings that we couldn't do because they couldn't come to DC with us. Yeah. So can you just speak to, that we're going to be in this world for a little bit. Any opportunities you see that we're in a virtual world to continue to move our cause forward?
Well, I'm sure you guys spend a lot of time thinking about this and are at this point better at it than I am. And you've given a couple of examples of how you've had the surprising benefit of having a meeting with a member of Congress in which you had 150 people from the home state standing with you on that message, and you couldn't have done that in person. So I'm big on engagement with policymakers, engagement with my neighbors, engagement with my family, engagement in and with my community. And really, with the challenge that we have before us, it's every tool in the toolbox. paradox. So, and what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for someone else. The important thing is that you do something. I mean, that was the wild success of the first Earth Day, right? Some people protested, some people had concerts, some people raised money with a bake sale to plant trees in a flood zone in their neighborhood. Other picked up trash. Some protested. I have this nice slide deck that wasn't appropriate for this show, but the images of what was happening on State Street in Madison, Wisconsin, where I was born. I was raised in Washington, but born in Madison, and there's archival footage there. And the diversity of things that were happening it just tickles me. And an entomology professor had done a sort of a simple booth, all handcrafted, obviously. Just telling the story of the importance of insects as pollinators for food, right? So there was this entomology booth, and then there were this very proper looking 50-ish style couple recruiting people for Dane County. That's the county that Madison resides in. Countywide cleanup. And other people were sitting writing letters to their congressmen saying clean up the air. And school kids, so many school kids wrote my father letters that we published it as a book. And I go around to schools myself. I love talking to the youth today. That gives me a sense of excitement because they see so many possibilities, and because really the younger demographic you look at, the stronger the support for climate change is, regardless of political ideology or what their parents think. It's quite interesting. I love going to the school kids, and I read them these letters that were sent to my father, and some of them are quite remarkable. My point being, school kids were writing letters, and an entomology professor was teaching about insects. And if you can't find something to do in between those two bookends, then you don't have much of an imagination.
Oh, that's so great.
You can.
Wow.
That's the beauty of Earth Day. You make meaning
Yes.
of it however you want to make meaning of it. The important thing is that you show up, that you use your voice, and that you do something, anything, right?
Yeah, perfect. Great.
That's
Well,
the culture change that we're creating, right?
Yep.
That's why individual action does matter, right?
Yes.
Because we're displaying our values, and cultural shifts occur when we do that. And so all of it's important, in my opinion.
Yep. Thank you so much. That was perfect. So glad you could make it. Been looking forward to this. You're certainly welcome to stay on the next 10 or 15 minutes if you like, but I understand it's a weekend and everybody's busy. So, but Thank you for that, Tia. That was absolutely lovely.
Yes, I'll listen in. I'll get off your screen so I can go check on my sleeping mom and make sure she's okay. And then I'll come back and listen to the rest. And I'm so grateful for your work, and I wish you great success in the new Congress.
Thank you so much. Appreciate
you.
that. Great. Okay, I want to just touch on for a moment our upcoming December conference. There's two things that I want to point to. We have a kickoff panel that is going to have the political scientist Hari Han, Shiling Su, whose book, The Case for a Carbon Tax, is, I think, should be basically a Bible for any CCL chapter, and John Woods from Braver Angels. So all three of those have been frequent guests of ours in different venues and really important voices. And what we wanted to do was to have a panel where, from different perspectives, we could take a look at what are the opportunities and challenges that we face coming out of this election. We, by design, also delayed the conference till December. Typically, our fall conference is done in November, the week after the election, but we wanted to wait for December, but we didn't want to wait too long. We wanted to wait till December so that the dust could kind of settle, because we thought the nature of this election would take a little bit longer to resolve. But we also wanted to make sure that we were the first group getting our voice, our message on the Hill, and that was done in the lame duck before even the new Congress comes together. We want to make sure that every single member of the House and Senate understands that any meaningful action on climate change has got to include a price. And so we want to make sure that we're there early and making it. You know, last time we were live in DC, a couple of our volunteers were in Nancy Pelosi's office, and she didn't attend the meeting, but they could hear her in the next room. And they overheard her saying, you know, CCL is on the Hill today. And we will be there again in December. And even though it will be virtual, it won't be live, we'll be there, we'll be on the Hill. I also want to point to one breakout session. One of the things we're having is a breakout session by state. So I'm hoping as many of you as possible can be at the conference and that you can be there for those state sessions. We believe a big part of our path to success this year is through the Senate. And if we can get as many people as possible to both plan and execute our meetings with our senators, we think that gives us one of our best avenues to success. So that's a breakout session that has not been part of this conference in the past, and I'm excited that, that it will be part of it this time. So one of the things that was mentioned on the video before today's session was all the work with the Environmental Voter Project. So a lot of you volunteered with the Environmental Voter Project. And as you know, a lot of people have a big commitment on the environment, but they don't necessarily vote. I just want to read you a little bit of the note that was sent back to Todd Elvins, who coordinates our action sheets, our action teams, and this call every month. She says, hi, Todd. As I mentioned when we spoke at the end of last week, CCL volunteers were so crucial to EVP's Get Out the Vote success. Almost every single one of our 32 phone banking shifts from October 31st to November 3rd was either led or supported by stellar CCL volunteer leaders from across the country. And on top of that, we had hundreds of more CCL volunteers participate in texting and calling during the period in the preceding months. I'm not exaggerating when I say we could not have done this without them. She says, I want to reiterate again, CCL volunteers and staff across the board are so incredibly dedicated to this work and so easy to work with. Your team consistently made my job as an organizer not only easier, but better with thoughtful feedback, great ideas, and regular communication. So I wanted to also just add my thanks for everybody who did volunteering, whether you were calling, texting, etc. I also just want to point to one meeting with some of our chapter members in Salt Lake City with Representative Curtis. This was a follow-up meeting to June. You know, we have been saying for forever that we're betting the ranch on relationships. And so what had come out of after the follow-up meeting is they agreed to have a 2-hour meeting that included a hike in the mountains around Salt Lake. That actually ended up being 2.5 hours long. That is a big statement of an enormous amount of trust. This is somebody who's not on the bill, and explain to them why not, but somebody who trusts our volunteers to work closely with them. I want to point to a couple of other things. We have something now called an action tracker where we're able to track things that we hadn't tracked before. So we're still able to track things like letters to the editor. And even though in my newspaper, the newspaper only publishes letters to the editor 3 times a week, some papers have gone from being daily to weekly. Even in the face of that, we published 1,822 letters to the editor so far this year. So even with less opportunity, there's a lot of action happening there. And 547 op-eds, which is remarkable. For the other people that are competing for space in the newspaper, have newspapers 547 times this year alone to say you're going to get a whole 2-page column, remarkable. And even in advance of our December lobby day, we've had 852 meetings with Congress, most of those being virtual, which is remarkable in my view. One of the things we can start tracking now is your social media interactions with your member of Congress. So we didn't have that capacity before, but now in the action tracker, when you correspond with your member of the House or Senate, that's now something we can track. What we want to do is make sure that we're providing resources to support whatever you need to do in any area where you need support. So now that there's additional things we can measure, and in particularly social media items, I think that's particularly important and exciting. Okay, so what are we doing this month? Well, in Canada, there's an opportunity to lobby between the end of November and the end of December, and also our November event. In the US, our number one action is to support our $1 million year-end fundraiser. So what we're hoping to do is to raise $200,000 on Giving Tuesday and $1 million between now and the end of the year. You do not have to wait until Giving Tuesday to donate. Anytime you do now from the end of the year, it will, a lot of you like to do what I like to do, which is just to check that thermometer we have on our website that shows how we're doing getting close to our goal. I think that we have positioned ourselves for this moment, and this is a big year, and $1 million is a big part of our budget. So even if the Democrats take both those Senate seats, we will need Republicans to get a bill passed. And I don't think anybody else has put themselves in this position right now, where at this moment, where now there's a Democratic president who's favorable to action on climate, that we have done the hard work over years to develop relationships, trusting relationships on both sides of the aisle. So it's possible for you to donate this year, either to Citizens Climate Education, if you need the tax deduction, Citizens Climate Lobby, if you don't. It's a big part of the year for us. I think that this is a really important moment. And if you can be one of the people that helps us fund that, that would be fantastic. Second thing we're going to do, second action is to get ready for our December lobby day and call Congress Day. So there's two pieces there, and I think both of them are important. I think a lot of people have been working on the election, and this was a bruising, painful election to go through. What we want to do is give people ways to ease back into their work here. And one of the simple things everybody can do is everybody can call Congress. So please encourage everybody on your chapter to call Congress on Congress Day. And then the other thing is actually preparing for the lobby meetings. We want to see as many members of the House and Senate as we possibly can. So let's get those meetings prepared. It was so inspiring in June hearing all the preparation people did, sometimes having multiple meetings to get ready. But what we want to do is make a lot of noise, and although it'll be virtual, let everybody know that CCL is on the Hill. Okay, so what's going to be happening from now till the start of the year? We're in the lame duck. We made some really big things happen in the last lame duck. We got a bill out in both the House and Senate. Then we'll be starting up the new Congress, and we know that Representative Deutsch wants to get his bill introduced as early as possible. Next month, our speaker is going to be Christine Figueres. Now, it just ends up that the December 12th call is the 5th anniversary of the signing of the Paris Agreement. Christine Figueres has much to do with that agreement happening as anybody. So we're so excited that she can be here to discuss that and discuss, as President-elect Biden says, the U.S. is joining the agreement again, what that means. So we're excited about having her in December. And then in January, we're going to have Noah Kaufman. Many of you read Noah Kaufman's paper. He's probably one of the world's leading experts on pricing carbon. So we're excited that we can have him. All right, everybody, this is a moment that we've waited for. We have a president who's favorable to taking action on climate. We have enough relationships with both the House and the Senate to achieve bipartisan solutions in both chambers. So this is a big deal. Let's go get it. And just one more time, Tia Nelson, thank you so much for making yourself available. That was a perfect message for this moment, and we're so grateful you could join us. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next month.